supporting the blackberry citrus.
Ooh. Okay, good evening. I'd like to call to order the Newberg School District Board of Directors meeting for January 13th, 2026. Director Wolfer is attending online, and in his place, the flag salute will be done by Director Eden. Are there any additions and or deletions to the agenda that anybody would like to propose? Okay, then we'll move on to the consent agenda. And always like to point out Newberg Rotary Foundation donated $3,500 to resource room supplies. I know that a lot of organizations donated to the resource room during the holiday season. It was a really quite amazing when I talked with Jan about all the things that people were wanting to bring in and food and everything. So that's great. The Fishers donated $2,500 to the Thespian Club, and Laura Oviatt donated $1,000 to the Aspire Club, and Ian McDonough donated $500 to the Thespian Club. So that's wonderful for all of those donations. And so I just need a motion for.
I move that the Newberg Dundee Public Schools Board of Directors approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any further questions? Okay, call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. James?
Aye.
Mhm.
Can you hear me? Aye.
Okay, we'll go without James' vote on this one. So the motion carries 6-0.
Like he's there, did he raise his hand?
Can you guys hear me?
Is his hand?
That's
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't, where do you see?
on the Zoom panel behind the TV.
Oh,
You don't-
okay.
You don't see it, I do.
Okay. So you guys can just help me with that
Yeah.
if we have vote. Okay, great. So now's the time for the public forum. Looks like we have some folks who want to come and speak.
They're actually helping with our presentation.
Oh, they're helping with the presentation. Okay. Then I guess we don't have anybody wanting to address the board. And so we'll move on to now our boundary update. Dave?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk and give kind of an update. We started this process in October. We've met 5 different times with over 10 hours of conversation, deliberation, and the rest. We've had over 50 folks who have been involved in it, parents, teachers, administrators. We've had folks from CPRD. We've had folks from the cities. And so it's been again, trying to analyze and get ready for this process. It's been a lot of work. Tonight, it's me, Brian Wood, our principal from Antonia Crater. We have Carrie Wilcuts and Stephanie Hunter, who volunteered at the last meeting to come and help provide some viewpoints. So we appreciate them being there. There weren't as many hands up as
As you might think.
but again, like I said, it's been a lot of process kind of getting to this place. And so I want to thank those folks for the work that they did. I know we rotated board members through the meetings. So you all have also kind of gotten experience sitting at the tables with parents and teachers and administrators as they were beginning to talk through these complex issues that are out in front of us. We're going to get it started here. So, thank you. So why this matters right now, there's a couple of things that are going on in the district that are keeping us from getting to where we need to be. The first one has to do with our enrollment is declining. Fewer students are entering our schools than in past years, and we don't expect that trend to change. I'm going to show you some data in a little while why that is, but that's one of the trends. The spring financial crisis of 2024, where between then and now, we've laid off 76.75 people, about 15% of our admin team, about 15% of our teaching staff, 12% of our classified. With all of those adjustments, we're still not gaining the financial stability that we need. We're basically running even. And there's a structural problem that's creating that. And I'm going to talk about that coming up. But this is the center issue of why we're not getting to where we need to be. Our current structure of elementary schools was built for different numbers. And again, this will come up as I present that. Waiting is just going to make this problem harder. So we've got to address it. And then the decisions kind of now protect staff and kind of where we're headed in the district. So this is the time. Current situation, we're graduating more students than are entering kindergarten. And again, I've got some data coming here, but that enrollment gap is growing. Birth rates are down locally and across the nation. The enrollment's uneven, and again, what I'm going to present in a little bit here is the problem isn't, yes, we have lost a lot of students, but that's not actually creating the problem. It's the amount of students that we have per grade level in a school that's creating the structural problems for us. These small cohorts create unstable class sizes. What happens if we do nothing? We started with this with our boundary committee, which is just staying status quo and raising class size creates a situation. And we modeled this and we ran it out in front of the committee where we have many classrooms going above 30 at the elementary level. And if they're not above 30, then basically everything becomes a blend, which again is not best practice when we're talking about instruction to our students. So we have to take some sort of action here. I also want to say that our current organization is good. It is 95% of the districts in the state of Oregon are in a K-5, K-6 configuration. And so moving to some other sort of model is not what 95% of the state is doing. There are other districts that run different models, and there aren't very many, is what I found. Two districts, Forest Grove and Scappoose, run a K4, and then a 5-6 and a 7-8 model. There's some advantages to that model, but there's just two districts in the state that run it. There's another model called K2 that runs K through 2 in one school and then 3 through 5 in another school. There's two districts that run that. Cascade is one of them. I'm not remembering the other school district. Okay. But the fact of the matter is, any of those, where we're at is probably better for Newberg. It's where we've been for a long time. It's where we do well. Our current grad rate is 91%. When I look back at the records back through 2009, that's the highest it's been since 2009, and I can't really find any records before that. So that may be our highest grad rate yet. We're also performing, as we've shown to the board in previous presentations, that compared against our comparative districts, we're outperforming all of them. Our school district is good. There are things that are going on well here. If we had the money to continue this model, we would. We're looking at a different model because we have a structural problem. And so this is a graph that you've seen before. It lists the the loss of students over time. We're the center bar there, and that is 18.86% since 2019. And certainly some of the challenges that Newberg has been through over the time, we've already talked about this issue, but I bring it back because of, again, the interesting part here is really around the other school districts here. You've got Westland, Wilsonville at 10.75%. You've got Tigard, Tualatin at 9.85%. We're not the only folks. Yes, we had a big loss, but basically everybody is seeing these same effects. Somewhere in that 8 to 10% range is kind of pretty normal for our school district, for school districts. And it has to do with the Oregon birth rates. This is the birth rate since 2007. And what you can see there is basically a 30% decline since 2007. And so we're having fewer births. There's fewer kids in our state. There's fewer kids in Yamhill County. And interesting is when you look at births inside the city, they're actually a little more stable. So, but I don't know what that's going to mean for us long run. Like, is that going to mean that our kindergarten classes are going to be larger? We haven't seen that yet, but that is something that's out there. I didn't bring that. Yeah, but the interesting thing here is again, we don't really have any thoughts that we're going to see larger kindergarten classes. Again, I can't remember. I've done this speech a couple of times now, but the kindergarten classes run about 280. Our graduating classes are right in the 330 range. So there's naturally going to be a drop over the next couple of years of 50 students, 40 students. That's what we're expecting. So we're expecting this decline to continue. And normally in a school district, when that happens, again, if you have fewer students, you need fewer teachers. So there is a trimming of teaching staff and the rest of the staff that goes with that. We have a structural problem that's keeping us from doing that. And that's the central issue that we have. And so this is, thank you. Yeah, might as well. Thank you. I'm behind. Sorry.
There's a chance. You gotta get more.
One more, thank you. So this is kind of our class sizes in two of our schools. I didn't put all the schools here because I'm here. I want to illustrate the point. And so we've got Crater here, and there's basically 2 teachers per grade level. And so it goes kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. He's got 3 sections at, and then fifth grade, 2 sections. And the problem here is this, is so in the spring when we staff, let's say that there's 27 kids in a grade level. If I saw that in the spring, I would probably issue 1 staff member for that. We're staffing, we want to be staffing somewhere closer to 23 to 1. Something like that would be good. At 27 in the spring, we would staff 1 teacher. Over the summer, 3 students move into that grade level, and now I'm at 30. And so this fall, this happened in multiple places in our school district. We chose to push in FTE at that time because of running kindergartens and lower level elementary classes at 30 is not our best move. But that money wasn't budgeted. And so again, we ended up burning some ending fund balance getting this. But then if you take a look here, grade 1 in Crater, 30 students in that grade level, but now the class sizes are 16 and 14. And when earlier in my earlier career here, we had 2 schools that had this situation. We had basically Dundee and Ewing Young. Now I have 4 schools, both Crater, Dundee, Joanne Austin, and Ewing Young are all in the same position. And what it means is it doesn't allow us to adjust class size the way we need to. It either makes them too high or it makes them too low. And this is the structural problem that we're having. I need more students per grade level is what we're looking for. And so like in beginning to look at our district, figuring out ways that we can move a boundary, we're trying to figure out how to get more kids in a grade level. We need 3 sections so we can start to even out the class sizes. So with that, we put this boundary committee together because we knew we needed to look at, first, could we change some boundaries to fix this structural problem? And I'm going to have Brian speak on kind of his perspective around the creation of the boundary committee and kind of how it came together and his perspective on that.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you for the school board members that rotated through the boundary committee meetings, and to all the members, as Dave talked about, we had 50 or more members there. And so the whole point of that, we had multiple stakeholders and multiple voices in the room to look at the data that Dave shared and a lot more data, to look at enrollment patterns, to look at boundary maps, school numbers. And part of that process, we were able to look at actual this year's numbers, how many kids are in every classroom across the district. So we had very accurate information, the best information we had at the moment. And we're able to look at potential reconfigurations and ultimately provide a recommendation to Dave and the school board. We weren't a decision making, we were simply looking through it all and what is the best recommendation that our boundary committee could come up with. With that, we had a
Big button.
There you go. Thank you. Some guiding criteria. So with that, and we revisit this every boundary committee to make sure that the committee had this at the center of our decision and conversations at our tables, which is our student learning, what's best for our kids. That's the guiding principle for all of our decisions. What's best for our kids and the learning. We have really good stuff happening in our schools. I've been fortunate enough to work in two of our elementary schools, have my kids go through Newberg, and we have great things happening. So what is best for kids? Going back to the community input, having multiple stakeholders there. How do we balance class sizes so we do not have those extremes? It's Dave showed the earlier slide to have averages. The averages can be misleading. When you say the average of the school is 20, that doesn't account for extreme highs and extreme lows. And so it's how do we have some class size balance there? And we want kids to feel comfortable, have access and belonging to their school. So everybody walks in feeling good about the school environment. More guiding criteria is safety and transportation. We had the bus barn there and looking at what is the impact to bus routes, time on buses, the additional costs to that. As we would look at different structures, that means potentially kids are having to be bused further across town, across Dundee to Newberg and back and forth. So what are the implications there? Neighborhood integrity, keeping those kids having a sense of belonging to their neighborhood school. Which one of these decisions helps us with our struggle, which is our financial stability? We don't want to make decisions that aren't getting us closer to that target. And then future growth, wanting to make sure that we maintain every decision we make also has the view of not only next year, but in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. We don't want to do something that's not going to be in the best interest of the school district long term. What the committee heard and agreed on. So we did what we call like an Atlas protocol, and an Atlas protocol is really, it's a method of bringing a group of people together, slowing down that and focusing on a shared set of facts, asking clarifying questions, and considering multiple perspectives, multiple points of views in order to create ultimately a recommendation to the board that is based on evidence. And so we looked at and in that Alice summary, the things that came out is, as Dave talked about, there is an enrollment decline. That is our core issue. We have class size instability. Boundaries alone, just moving lines, may not solve the problem by itself. And then every option has a trade-off. There is no option that only has upside. There's going to be trade-offs with every one of these. And that the committee we need to be focused on trust and transparency. So that's kind of what came out of our Atlas protocol. And then we looked at multiple scenarios. So we looked at, can boundary lines adjustments support the shift that we need to make our schools and our class sizes more stable? Different options, K4 elementaries, 5-6 upper elementary models. That would add one additional transition for our students. So instead of being in a school for K5, you would have an additional transition for your elementary students. We looked at K2 as a primary, then 3-5 as an intermediate. Again, one more transition. And what that would be is we'd have multiple campuses that were K2 onlys and multiples that were 3-5s. And that way it would increase the volume of the K2 students. So you could have the stability at a grade level by having 3 to 4 classrooms at each grade level. But again, that's a different transition. and there's trade-offs with busing. And we looked at others. So other models we looked at is a K4 and then having a 5-6 school, 5-6 school and a 7-8 school, and maintaining the dual language as a magnet school here at the Edwards campus. We looked at K2, 3-5 and a dual language magnet school. We looked at a K2, 3-5 in addition to having the dual language magnet school and closing New and Young. We looked at a K4 model. So elementary is a K4, a 5-6 upper elementary, a 7-8 middle school, in addition to closing the dual, having the dual language magnet school at Edwards and closing New and Young. We looked at what if we just closed New and Young? What if we just had the dual language magnet school at Edwards and closing New and Young? A shift to a K6 elementary model, which brings more kids in there, and a 7-8 middle school. Again, by having a K6 elementary, we have more students there, but it doesn't change the number of students at each grade level. So you still have, back to the scenario of 2 classrooms at a bunch of grade levels and the instability there. And then a current K5 and the status quo. And what we looked at is through all these different models, some of them were kind of voted off quickly because they didn't solve the issue. Like going back to the K6, that didn't solve an issue. It just kept more elementary students in the buildings, but it didn't solve the issue of instability at our grade levels. So that was able to be voted off quickly. And honestly, most of these options, we had to go back to multiple meetings and look at and get more data, and gave Dave and the district office team of, we need a little more information, to slowly move things off and look at the financials and look at transportation. No one option is perfect. We go back to that. What is option is the one that's going to get us closest to our ultimate goal and the most stability. And really what it came down to is we kind of needed to do it all. By doing all of it together, we got us about halfway to our financial stability that we needed, a little over $2 million. Before we kind of go on about what became clear, one thing I wanted to ask is we have, as Dave introduced, Carrie Wilcuts and Stephanie Hunter, a parent and a teacher, and get their kind of perspective on how this process rolled out. Because it wasn't always, simple conversations at the table. There was hard conversations. So if I can invite them to talk about what those conversations look like at their tables, that'd be wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question on what was important to us about the process. First, we want to thank you guys all for the opportunity to share. I also want to thank many people who are not in the room, and we had an incredible number of parents who were involved in this process, which opened up a lot of transparency and healing in the process that Newberg School District has been going through for a number of years. And I also want to thank the board members who took the time to come and work with us as well. To be very honest, with the board members and the community out there that's listening, the participation in the last 4 months of this process was very, very hard. There's not anything about it that was easy. I personally didn't look forward to coming to each meeting that we had, because the meeting before, we weren't necessarily always getting to a solution. Again, it was a process to talk and to share and to give perspective. But because we had a process, because we had the objective, because we had transparent information at all times, we had guidelines to follow, we had the opportunity to have discourse, we had many respectful disagreements, and we kept asking for more information. We evolved into a process that actually ended up being good, very, very good for Newberg. Again, considering where we've been the past few years. What was clearly reflected in the experience was the fact that all the stakeholders came back together and worked harder than I've ever seen anybody work before in the last 10 years. And it was that hard work to do something really, really good that was the impact of what we all walked away with. It was for our kids. It was for the families that live in this town and raise those children. We are just one location on this huge map across the United States that are grappling with this very same problem. We're just one tiny little community. Like many of you, I now have adult children and they have babies in this community. And I hope that they stay here and their children can attend one of the 9 campuses that we have that their grandparents attended and their great grandparents attended. They want to have that opportunity. As an elementary teacher in this community, I know families and community members count on us to do this really, really hard work. And it's often making challenging decisions in the process and decisions that some of us walk away not feeling great with. So I want to thank you for allowing us to participate in this process. I know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're just at the very, very beginning. So there's more to come, and we need to do this work in order to raise and educate our community, which is the future generations.
I'd agree that the process was definitely a challenge. We were able to meet within our school communities. At one point, the middle schools joined together as one, but each of the elementaries stayed individual because we each have our own needs. And at the middle level, it really felt like we could have that conversation together to see what kids at that level need. And it was a challenge because there's no good solution that isn't status quo, because we don't want our kids in huge classes, but we also don't want them blended, but we don't want tiny classes because that's unsustainable. So we have to find a solution for that. I think at the middle level, we're kind of excited about the possibility of the K4, 5, 6, 7, 8, because 5, 6 is such a unique age group. I teach 6th graders, and every spring when the parents come in for the Wildcat welcome, they're like, oh my gosh, middle school, it's terrifying. It is, and it's not. I also have a 6th grader of my own at Chehalis Valley. So just having that opportunity for a space for those kids could be really exciting. Simultaneously, status quo is fantastic. We're doing a great job. So I really appreciated being part of the process. It was great to have those conversations and try and solve the math problem, because that's what Dave kept bringing back to us of how can we fix this issue and still meet the needs of our students.
Thank you. Is that me? Okay, got it. So it was at this time, I think it was the 4th meeting, as we really started to wrestle with starting to get down to some closer decisions. A parent at the meeting brought up this idea of, what about additional revenue? Our situation here seems to be either with additional revenue, we can maintain our current K-5 neighborhood schools models with good class sizes. Without it, we have to restructure. There's no, staying in the status quo is not, we can't do that with the numbers of kids that we have per grade level. And so we began to explore this. The committee, and so I'm going to talk about what the committee recommended, because, and then I'm going to explain some more of it. The committee made a recommendation in our last January 8th meeting. We voted in December, and then I tabulated all the data and then brought it back to our January 8th meeting. And what it was decided is that, again, the K2 3-5 model, I felt like as folks were, it was voted down. So it did not rise up. And I think the issue was just around, while it solved the math problem, because it basically, if you think about it, there's 6 grades, 2 teachers per grade level, 12 teachers. When we go to a K2 3-5 model, now 2 schools, let's say Joanne Austin and Crater, 12 sections each, they take their K2s and they send it to the same building. So now I have 12 sections, 3 grades, or 4 sections per grade, which makes it easier now for me to adjust the class size. It solves that math problem. But the indication I got from the committee is it was a bridge too far. We're basically busing for 3 of the 6 elementary years, we're busing the entire district. or at least 4 schools of the 6 we would end up busing. So if you possibility of 3 of your 6 years, we would bus Maple Rush kids to Dundee. That I think was, in the end, that just didn't seem very productive. So that got voted down. So it kind of left us in this K4, 5, 6, 7, 8 model. I would say that, the slide I had earlier, which is, I think the system we're in is better. But look, I was the superintendent in Forest Grove. This is the model that Forest Grove runs. It's an excellent model too. It's just going to mean a lot of change for Newberg to do this. The other things that have to come along with this, because that change only gets us a little bit. The rest that has to happen is there is a recommendation to close Ewing Young. You don't save as much money as you might think in closing a school because of all of the staffing that is tied to students goes with those students, and that's teaching, classified. Most of that is going to go wherever those kids end up. We would save in some administrative positions, some classified positions that wouldn't necessarily. So there is some savings here, but it's not as much as you think. The next thing is that we've got to find a way to get more kids per grade level in specifically Crater, Joanne Austin, and Dundee. And the way that we did this, the recommendation is that we make Edwards a dual language only magnet school. What that does is at Edwards, we have basically 2 teachers, I would call them sections, but 2 sections of dual language in every grade level. And then we have another section of English only. Those students would we would enroll them into Joanne Austin, Crater, and then some of the kids where the boundary sits, probably it's more logical for them to go to Dundee. But it's not a huge number of kids. Most of the kids would be, what that does is it gives me more students per grade level in Joanne Austin and Crater, which allows us to now regulate our class sizes better. So that's the logic in why this model was chosen. It's a really challenging, again, all of these ideas get us closer to where we need to be as far as solving our structural problem. But Edwards would lose its neighborhood school status. You would go to Edwards for the dual language program, but if you live in the neighborhood and you're not wanting dual language, then you're going to be bused off to one of our other schools. That's a really challenging idea, and I know that, but we can't stay in the status quo without more revenue. The second recommendation is, I should point out that all of this right now, we've got kind of, we believe it's about $2.1 million worth of savings is what all of this gets us. The other thing that the board felt like, that this committee recommended after we started talking about it was the question that our parent asked, which is, what about a local option? This seems like an opportunity for our community to talk about and for us to raise this question with our community. And after we presented data around the local option to the committee, they did take a vote in December, and they voted 25-1 that yes, they should recommend to the school board that we look at and pursue a local option. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time. Where's my next part here? Is that back at the recommendation? I think there's another part where we were going to invite you to talk about those recommendations before I move on. I'm forgetting my spot here. Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you. So here's the local option levy information that we presented off to our boundary committee. It's a voter approved property tax that the Oregon school districts can use to raise operating dollars above the state school fund. It can pay for, actually one more. it has a very flexible spending mechanism, but I want to talk about that a little bit because of our plans for this are a lot more focused. It basically is voters approve a tax rate per thousand of assessed value, not your retail value, but your assessed value. We collect it over 5 years. That's the legal max. After 5 years, it needs to be renewed. There's some restrictions to it, but I can tell you right now that the things that we're beginning to think about is like how much this would be. They're not approaching either of those two, the Measure 5 limit or the compression, where there might be compression. Wanted to just show kind of where we're at compared to our neighbors with tax rates. Newberg's total tax rate is 1.40. There's no local option here. Sherwood is at 4.87 with a $1.50 local option is what they've approved. Wilsonville is at $1.50 for a local option and a $4.43 total. Beaverton has a $1.25 local option, and they're at $3.50 per thousand. 351 is the exact. Hillsborough is at no local option. They're about 1.9. McMinnville, with just their bond rate, is at 2.46. We've got Canby at 1.8 and then Yamhill Carlton at 105. Corvallis, another district that we often use as a comparator. They're pretty similar. They're also having these exact same discussions around declining enrollment and closing of schools. They're at 3.4 with a $1.50 local option. So again, I think our goal here is not to make, we want to pick a rate that makes sense. But again, it feels like there's some room here for us to talk about a local option with our community. Targets. Wanted to kind of point out kind of where we think we need to go here. This top line is basically the, if we get the 5 days of furlough back, which we need to do. We need to get our kids back in school on a full calendar. That's $1.3 million that we have to add in. From where we are this year, we need to be $1.3 million more to get the furlough days back. Our already agreed upon COLAs and the rest is about 2.29 million, and that works out. That's exactly what we've already agreed to in contracts. We haven't bargained the classified contract yet, so that's an unknown amount right now. We're looking at the bond over the next 2 meetings, not this one, but the next 2 meetings. Nate will be coming in to talk about PERS bond rates because there's things going on surrounding the ending of our side accounts that pay down our rates, and we need to start planning for that. And then busing there's always changes in it. And I want to tell you, these are really preliminary numbers because we haven't started our budget process. I mean, we're right in the beginning parts of our budget process, but we needed to kind of get a picture for where we're headed. Status quo, restore ending fund balance to 2.5% is about $4.5 million. And so I want to just point out here that we're not talking about adding administrators. We're not talking about more tech. We're not talking about, this is just simply running our school system for a full school year and trying to build back in our ending fund balance so we are sustainable year in and year out. And that's at 4.5 million. I think that's probably our best guess. Right now, I think that's our best target that I think we should be headed towards. To do what we're doing this year, to get our ending fund balance to the the board policy of 7%, this is about $7.4 million. That's going to take us, I think, some time to get to, but I wanted you to at least see what it would take to do it in a year. That's the run our school district full school year and be back to an ending fund balance that we think is board approved. So would this levy, and again, we're right in the beginning parts of it. I've got the timeline coming up here. So this would get us sustainability for a defined period. It's 5 years is what this bond is. We're kind of going back and trying to do the work right now to make sure that we can, again, build the ending fund balance that we need, buy the teaching staff that we need to keep our schools running. It buys us time and it buys us stability. And right now we're scraping, we're working really hard to build ending fund balance. But to do that, I got to raise class size. We have to raise class size. And the structure of the elementary schools are not allowing us to do that without sending class sizes up over 30. And so that's the structural problem that we're having. No matter what, we're still going to have to manage this. Like, we have an issue with class size at the secondary level. We raised it in the last 2 years, and it stayed high. So we actually still need to do some work in lowering our secondary class sizes. So it's still going to take like management, and we're still going to have to figure out where we're going to place these class sizes, because even with the extra revenue, it's still going to take work to get there. So it kind of came down to this key question as when the boundary committee was trying to figure out what do we recommend to the board? And it kind of came down to what would the system look like with a levy and what would it look like without one? The levy passes, we stabilize for 5 years. We would keep doing what we're doing. We would not do the restructure. The restructure, we would do that because we need that extra revenue. We've got to save money on it. The levy doesn't pass, we have to restructure. We cannot stay in the status quo. We're going to continue to just do what's happening to us, which is we're just not making progress on growing our ending fund balance and getting back the financial stability that we have. Timeline. We're getting close. I'm going to bring you in right after I do this. Tonight, we're presenting this information back to you from the committee. The next board meeting in January, we're going to bring some motions to you. It'll be the first reading. I'm out. I've now done 3 buildings and 1 parent group. I'll be out to every parent group in the district to run this presentation. I'll be to every staff. In that, we're providing, I'm taking verbal questions and answering them, but we're grabbing those questions so that we can create an FAQ so we can answer these questions for folks. And then we're also doing a thought exchange. We're doing some digital engagement because I want to bring back to you at the next meeting data. Like, what are people thinking? What are their concerns? What do they like about these ideas? What do they not like about these ideas? So we'll be bringing that all back to you too. And then February, the first one in February would be where we're looking for some action on those items. This still falls within our timelines. They're still working if we need to move for a levy. And then before I get to closing, I wanted to give our both parents and staff members an opportunity to kind of talk about the recommendation and how they were feeling about it and how their group members kind of felt about it.
So again, we're back here to talk about a hard theme trending, that this is hard. So the word levy is very, very hard. And, got to thinking sitting here tonight, it's kind of ironic that I'm asked to stand up and talk about it because I teach at the school that we're talking about closing. I was originally brought to the school, Ewing Young Elementary, for a desperate need of benchmark support. And that is because we were looking at large class sizes. And we know as a community and responsible educators that our students cannot meet benchmark the more students we stuff into a classroom. our littles that are acquiring language and are acquiring their foundational reading skills cannot grow by putting more students in a classroom. And on that same note, limiting the number of staff members that are there to support them. So the levy, that's a big blow. It affects everyone. It affects homeowners. It affects home developers. It affects renters. It affects all of our small business owners. It affects my adult children who are trying to have babies in this community and own their first home. It's a big ask. On the same point of that being a big ask, we're not being responsible if we don't ask, because we can't sustain the model that we have moving forward. We're in a business that's run by numbers. The numbers of hot bodies that we have in the classroom, those are the precious individuals that we're responsible to teach so that they can grow and graduate and work and live in this small community and contribute and give back to this small community. So this is another very, very hard ask. I do think that it would be of detriment to our community to look at closing any of our heritage campuses that we have here in this town. They all offer not only to their small little community where those families chose to live there and raise their children there, to farm there, but it then falls into the middle school and then into the high school, and that reverberates into our community as a whole. So it is a hard, true ask to look at what a levy would look like. But I know that even as Mr. Parker has stated, that we will be very, very responsible at looking at the appropriate amount. So it is the least impactful. Thank you.
I'll talk a little bit more about the choice of the restructure if we have to go that route. We wanted to make sure we got more of the same grade level in the same school, especially in the elementary. But we also looked at the 5, 6, 7, 8 because it brought our community together sooner. Because right now they come together as 9th graders. And if we can bring the community together at 5th grade and get kids used to each other and interacting with each other and create that diversity on a campus, it can also be really impactful. So that was another piece that we talked about going with the levy. I still believe that the best option is our status quo because we do have great schools. So hopefully we can consider that and get the revenue that we need to be able to sustain our current system.
Thank you. And I appreciate you. I know it's always hard to get up and speak, but I really do appreciate your words. So closing, these are really difficult decisions, and there's none of them that are easy. There's challenges around all of this. I think the committee has looked at so many different ways, and they've come up with what I would say are responsible decisions, the recommendations. They're not fun, but they are, I think, in our situation, the right recommendations, looking at this whole thing. Our goal here is not to win an argument, but we've got to get to a place where we are financially stable again. And so it's going to take some hard decisions, whether that is recommending a levy or whether that's restructuring. Again, the community will get to choose in the end with their vote on where they want to go with this. I think we have to provide them an opportunity to do that. And with that, like I said, we've got, with the other speeches I'm doing in other places, I would be pointing you towards a thought exchange right now to begin to share and rate and look at different ideas. I'm out to do more community engagement. I'll also start, once we get closer to knowing whether this, maybe a couple of weeks from now, I'll also get out and do community groups, Rotaries, and I'm happy to talk to folks and talk through what this means. We want to be as transparent as possible. We understand it's asking a lot, but I think, again, we have a great school system here and it's been through a lot, but we still, like I said, we still are doing great work in the school district. And I think we're of value to the community, to the economic prosperity moving forward of this community. So I think we're worth it. With it, I will say thank you.
Are there any questions on the board?
Oh,
I-
lots.
I have one.
Okay.
The next meeting is first reading on the 27th and then the 10th of February is a motion. What I was wondering about is are those two referring to a levy option, or are those also decision-making points around, and if the levy didn't pass, the restructuring model?
So I think what we're gonna bring to you would be, we're doing polling right now because we're still trying to be really thoughtful about what is the ask on the levy. And we need some more polling to do that. So on the 27th, we would be bringing you a pretty laid out request of what the rate is. And there's some specific language, legal language, that we need to put in front of you that you as a board will, if you choose to take action on it, there's very specific language that we'll use. The other one will be this restructuring model. And we will budget based on what you take action on, because we're not going to know. The levy is, the vote on that would be May 19th would be the final date. I think the mail-in ballots would start around May 1st. That's way too late for us. We're already moving on developing budgets. And so we will budget based on kind of what you take action on. If you take action on the recommendation to restructure, that's what we're going to start moving on. If you say that, no, we're not going to do that, we're going to stay in the status quo, then we will do the status quo. We know, I mean, that is a choice that you can make. The other choice that we can make is around furlough days. I do not want to have furlough days next year, but that is a choice out there. That is a lever that we pull when we're trying to make budgets balance. But what I'll bring you, I think I answered the question, but if I didn't, yell it.
Oh, sorry, my thing was already on. So it sounds like we have to decide the restructuring
Yeah.
situation on February the 10th. And then, does that mean if the levy passes, we're still moving ahead with the restructuring?
No, I think the idea here would be the levy would basically make it so we can continue to run our system as is. With some changes, I think we need to do a little bit of work. I don't think it's a lot of work, but there is some work to do at the middle school level and at the high school. Elementaries are still, they have excellent class sizes right now. I mean, and again, I would tell you that our goal here isn't to raise class sizes because our elementaries are in a good spot right now. And there's always bubbles. So there's always places that we're worried about, but by and large, our class sizes, I mean, I talked to other superintendents and other teachers in other districts, and they don't have our class sizes. And that's a good thing. I mean,
Thank you.
Do you have anything else, Celeste?
No.
Okay. So appreciate everybody. Carrie, you made a comment about trust the process. Yeah, we all want answers immediately, but I think the process is the right thing to do. You have to go through the process. So I think that's what we're trying to do and what Dave's trying to do at this point is go through the process to all angles. So I, applaud the committee for doing that and going forward with this. Just, I guess, one quick question, and I have a couple comments. So then the question about the neighboring slide or the neighboring district slides where we had the decrease, was that updated with like this year's values or last year's values? Because I don't remember so many being in the tens or close to 10% reduction.
That is not updated. That was the one that we showed.
Here?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot about that then. It still surprised me that it's just not us. So I'm thinking, okay, if we take away the big exodus that one year, then we actually might be in line with everybody else. I guess one comment, I'm thinking as we do this message, I think we have to find other ways of connecting with people outside of anybody that's within the district, right? One way is thinking of it as kind of maybe like some type of company or whatever that does, assembly work, where every school you have like each grade level is like different things, but what you're doing is you're running too thin at an operational level and you just can't sustain it. So what you're doing is consolidating instead of every school doing doors and a window and framing. I don't know, that's popped in my head. You're going to have one school that does all windows, and you're going to have one school that does all frames. So you're consolidating, your centers of excellence. You're consolidating your schools and teachers, and it also help allow for the operational, flexibility that you guys need. I think we need maybe more examples like that to express that to the larger community, because what I witnessed at the community or committee is everybody was very well, either they're a teacher or they're an administrator or they're very involved. And I'm not saying that's bad, that's great. There's a lot of love in that room. But to help get this out with the other community, I think we need other talking points.
Okay.
And then with that also, I think we need a little bit more of I think our group did not, I know I put a post-it on this last meeting, like more like infographics type of stuff. Like, yeah, we may call out like, okay, well, we know Edwards is going to stay and we close Union Young, but that still then leaves the other schools. So like, you can even just genericize it. School one is this, and this is the type of savings, or we can reduce staff. And so people can see the actual tick mark up to like savings or being able to meet budget. Because then the last thing I'll say is I'm all for the levy, but I also just don't want in 5 years to be sitting here if I'm still on the board and have to make the hard decision again. I don't want to crutch and not move towards a better goal, a better end state. I would almost feel better, and this is just me personally, I'm not speaking for the board or you, me personally, I would say, if we get the levy, great. The next 2 years, we're going to stay status quo, but that in 3, 4, and 5, we're going to start making progress in case the levy doesn't pass again, because we're going to have to, right? And I don't know if you're comfortable and kind of having that viewpoint or whatever, but I think you're going to win a lot more people over if you were very open and honest about that. So,
yeah. So we're still at the very, this is the first time that we've really talked to you about this. So we're very early. The idea of how we're going to need to communicate some of this I think your ideas are all very good. We're also kind of working on some, like, what does the plan look like over 5 years? I'll tell you, like, when we do estimations in a biennium, like next year will be very accurate where we're at. The year after that, it becomes much more of an estimate. The year after that becomes really, that estimate is very broad. We are trying to work through some of that right now because I'm trying to gain that exact picture, Jeremy, is like, what does this look like over 5 years? What do we think the COLAs are going to look like over the 5 years? And so we're looking at some of that, but I'll tell you the 3, 4, and 5 years will be, those will be really challenging for us to forecast, but we are working on that because we want to be able to tell that same story that you just talked about.
I want to echo the gratitude for everybody who's played a part in this process. It's certainly been a lot so far, and it feels like we are just getting started. I think that, when kind of like Jeremy mentioned, so many people that have been involved, closely involved thus far are really close to education, right? We're all volunteers of some sort or educators or parents. And it will be very important to get this information out to the community in a way that makes sense to people who are not living in education all day, every day, like many of us are. I think that the communities of Edwards and Ewing Young are going to need a lot of support and communication. I have a lot of, I mean, it breaks my heart to think about closing a school. But I'm also very concerned about the dual language program and what that would look like at a 5, 6, 7, 8 and how we staff that. And I'm worried about losing the neighborhood school of the entire south side of Newberg. That this entire community down here would not have that neighborhood school feeling. So just two concerns that are sort of top of mind right now for me in the Edwards piece, which is just a piece of the equation. I'm also I have been, you know, in my late night ponderings looking at the other districts. And I think that the information about other districts and the taxes paid in other districts is going to be really powerful, and making that really clean and accessible is going to be important. Both Sherwood and Beaverton still have active websites on their districts of their levy information. I think we can learn a lot from those districts and how they presented the information, and sort of how they proposed it and the visuals that they used. And so I will continue to be Googling late into the night. And I'm sure that, you know, our staff here will be doing the same. And hopefully we can learn from those districts that have had success in these situations before.
Thank you to you guys for being here and to those boundary committee meetings, because they were difficult, and I'm really impressed by our community and what we were able to do in those. I have two questions that don't necessarily need to be answered right now. One, I am interested in what that satellite school idea looks like. Is that meant to be K4 there just for the dual language, or does that go further? Because I worry about the different learning outcomes that we're going to have. It would separate our, you know, a certain group of students to be on their own and not have the same development, the same community as everyone else. And that's something that has worried me since we started talking about the satellite school idea. The other one, as far as the levy, I kind of brought it up before, but I'm curious if we hadn't had our financial struggles, I assume we wouldn't be at this moment trying to talk about restructuring our schools. And so I'm just really interested in, if we were to get back to status quo, are we more able to deal with these bubbles that happen and to deal with this year by year as the state school fund? We're losing kids, but we're using last year's numbers so we can make these adjustments in time. Do we get to a place where the stability of having that 7% ending fund balance makes it so we can deal with these struggles without having in 5 years to make a drastic decision, because we're dealing with it as it comes, rather than we're trying to make these changes, we're trying to build back up $5 million. It seems like an impractical thing to do. But I would hope that if we could get back to stable, we don't have to make drastic changes in 5 years, that we're able to be more measured about these kind of ideas to make lasting changes, but not ones that are so drastic. So it would just be interesting to know, what would it look like right now if we were stable? And if we are in 5 years, are we able to handle these declines that are coming every single year?
So I think I don't think I mentioned this, which is, again, we've been in this enrollment decline for several years. And so like we've had the kindergartens at 280, 250. So we're already multiple years into this. So there is a place where our graduating classes of 330 become closer to 280. And at that point, we begin to level out on the funding. We're not constantly losing. that's our estimation right now. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with the birth rates, if they're going to continue to fall. But what I can tell you is that it does look like there is a place here where our enrollment begins to level out. At that place, then yes, this would work. If we continue to drop, then we do have there's another conversation for us to have down the road about where do we go structure-wise. I don't think the levy buys us, like, we're not totally out of that conversation. But I do think it gives us time to make a smart decision. I've been talking to folks. Another really critical, important thing is that we keep schools for 75 to 100 years. And so, like, we don't think about replacing a school until they're very old. And the community owns these schools. It's still, I mean, we just had a bond on the Dundee, so that one is still being paid for. But closing these schools have big impacts 50 years down the road here, because you already own these assets or will own them by the time that comes around. So we have to be very thoughtful about when we think about closing an asset. Whether we sell that asset, whether we repurpose it, it's just a really big decision. And yes, we do have this problem right now, this next whatever number of years, but we plan in 100-year chunks. And the cost of these buildings is exorbitant. And so it's just like, as we think about this, we also need to think about the 5-year, but it's the 10, 20. Our new building in Dundee basically has fields all around it, and Dundee has plans. At least they're starting to have plans about what those fields are going to be. They have things that they're working on, but again, I see growth somewhere down the road here. I don't think it's going to come in 5 years, but I do see 10 and 20 years as us needing these facilities. So it's just a really challenging piece. But I do think the enrollment will begin to level out. That's my best guess right now.
So if we were stable, it would be easier for us to deal with these things.
Absolutely.
We don't necessarily, it wouldn't be a situation where if we were at 7% ending fund balance, we're still like, hey, we need to go out and collect this local option levy just so we can sustain. That we would be in a position to sustain without.
We believe.
Thank you.
The Oregon birth rate charts and then the county ones, those, if I'm remembering, those were like a steady decline over some time. Were those like those charts that we saw, were they just 5 years or were they longer than that?
No, it was 2007 through 2020. I don't know, then 23, I want to say.
So it's not just like a little blip we're in. It's
No.
been
No.
20 years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's been 20 years, why do we think it will change?
The other thing that I didn't put up is, again, I think the births in the town have been pretty stable. Which is a little bit surprising when I saw the data. I'll try and push that out to the board. I do have that in one of my things. I was just trying to figure out how to which slides to include here. But it's still a big question. We don't, and the person who does the population estimates and stuff used to work at PSU. He's now a private consultant, but I think there's an opportunity for us to maybe go out and take a look at, see what they're saying.
I'm wondering if the slide, sorry, Andy, can the slide deck be shared with us?
Yeah.
Just, I feel like we've got to really get this.
We'll put it up on the boundary committee website so we'll add all of those pieces in. I also got a request to see the charts as I've gone out people understanding the problem about the number of students per grade level. And that's the problem that's creating our challenges. So yes.
Well, at the risk of diluting the message of gratitude, I'll add my voice to it. Thank you, Dave, Brian, and Carrie and Stephanie. In particular, I was drawn to the comment, I think, Carrie, you made it about how this, as difficult as the boundary committee meetings were, was a step towards bringing our community back together and building trust. I want to underscore that because I think that is, in many ways, part of the heart and soul of what we're talking about here in community schools. I am I think like many of us trying to wrap my mind around all the many facets of this. And so I have some really concrete questions, and then I have some questions that are just sort of like helping me think about my own thinking. I think it would be really helpful if we're talking about a levy to be as crystal clear for our own understanding, but also with our community about what that means. So if we were to consider a levy, what would be the impact on families, right? At different rates, right? You showed different rates in different districts. So what would that look like here in Newberg for, sort of the market average home? And then I think it would be really important for us to talk about what would those funds be used for? What could they be used for? What can't they be used for? What would we use them for? So those are some specific questions that I have. I also think when we talk about cost savings, like 2.1 million is the number that I saw. I would like to see some itemization of that. So for example, how much of that 2.1 million comes from, say, closing Ewing Young? Right? Given what you said about, the teachers will travel with those students, we'll probably have some increased busing costs as a result of moving students. Right? So at the end of the day, what does it actually save us there? Those specifics, I think, will be really important. Here's what I'm struggling with, and I appreciate that many of us are saying some similar things. We started this conversation by saying that we've got declining enrollment. We also started by saying that our elementary structure was built for different times. And so I'm trying to hold that in one hand with this notion of the status quo. And I don't know that I've got that worked out yet, because if we can say that the declining enrollment is still there, and we know, and we're naming that our elementary structure in particular was built for different times, I don't see how we can responsibly just do either the levy or this massive restructuring. I feel like probably what we're talking about is a both and. There's got to be something that we can think about that maybe reduces the burden of a levy in a way that might make that overall more attractive for our community. In other words, if we think about a dollar per thousand instead of $1.50, would that be more successful than the larger amount with some restructuring? You know what I mean? And so I think it's easy for me to see the presentation tonight and to think about kind of that either or. When what I'm really wondering about is what about a both and? What are some of the things that we can do? And I hear others asking those questions, and I hear you saying we still have to manage it well. So for me, seeing some specifics around what would be the increase in revenue specifically with different rates, and what would the cost savings be of each of those different aspects of a restructuring would be really, really helpful. And then the last thing that I want to say is, as I'm looking at Jeremy and Saul when they're commenting, behind Saul's right shoulder is this poster that says "Innovate," right? Inspire, innovate, succeed. What does it look like for us to think about revenue in other ways? What are other ways that we can make our district more attractive? And I don't know if we're even there. I don't know if we're at a spot where we can entertain those conversations, sort of dreaming. But are there other ways that we can think about increasing revenue by virtue of increasing our enrollment, right? We have some number of students that are in this community that no longer attend school in this community. Do we have a finger on the pulse of what it would look like to bring some of those students back to a neighborhood school? I'm interested in having those conversations.
So there were a lot of questions there. Thank you. w- what I would say is that again, maybe the wording that they were built for a different time is not the right way to say that, because what we're really saying is that our current class sizes at the elementary level are good. And without more revenue, we're going to have to increase them. With revenue, we can maintain adequate, good class sizes. That's the statement.
So I'm going to push on that a little bit, because in the presentation, we saw class sizes, average class sizes of 21.
Yeah.
The state funds us, I believe I've heard you say, at 23.
Yeah.
So we are still overstaffed.
Yeah.
Right. I hate to say that. Like I hate to say that, but this is what I'm talking about.
Right.
Right. Does status quo continue forward when we are overstaffed?
Yeah.
Right. In some of our elementary classes of 15.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's dreamy. I get that. And amazing things we can do for our students.
Right.
But I feel like part of our responsibility in this conversation of fiscal responsibility and stewardship is to bring those things up.
Mhm.
Right. Is to talk about those. Staffing at a good level and staffing at an unsustainable level, there's a fine line there.
So again, I would just say that in the restructure is about $2.1 million. We said we got about target of about 4.5, which means you need about 2.4 more million dollars worth of cuts. Without that additional revenue, you're looking at cuts of this restructure is about 16 FTE with the administration and some classified. There's probably another 19 FTE that we're going to have to pull out to get it. So again, I just got to go back to without additional revenue, you're going to push class sizes into very uncomfortable places.
Yeah, and I want to be really clear about this. We run the risk of speaking about this as an either or, right? Either the restructure or the levy. And I really am in favor of a both and, right? And so the 4.5, that's a very healthy target. I think I can get behind that wholeheartedly. But is there work that we can do? Like, again, status quo, right? Means the reality is that we're still overstaffed in some of those areas.
Yeah. And so what I would tell you is the part there where it says we still need good management. So no, Andy, we are definitely going to have to look at how we manage class size going forward. I think the question here is are we going to do the restructure? Are we going to close Ewing Young? Are we going to make Edwards a dual language school if the levy passes? The answer would be no for me. You guys will end up giving me some direction on this. But I don't think we sell this if we're going to say we're going to move forward on this restructure. Now, we are going to absolutely going to have to continue. We've got to manage secondary class sizes. I know there's work to be done there. And we're going to have to continue to manage elementary. And we need to move it up. Like I said, what's happening right now is, and the other issue is that the costing of all of these different models, the boundary committee got all of that. So all of that information is there. I know that you have at different periods of time attended different ones. You've seen different of their spreadsheets. So I do want to just point out that they got all that info, specifically what all the costs were. But yeah, I'm not saying when we say status quo, again, maybe I need to use some different wording, because we're still going to have to manage our class size and deal with that. But I would rather, we staffed it at 23-1 in the spring. And then we ended up having to push in FTE because the class sizes went over 30 in places. We've done some blends in other places. We'll continue to do that where it's necessary. But I don't want to make it seem like we're just going to get the money and walk away. That's not it either. We're going to have to continue to manage this system. But really important for me is to get all these questions. So with the other groups, and I'm having them write them on Post-its, and then we'll put together an FAQ around this. The information you're looking for around the rates and all of that, that'll come out as we get closer to the next meeting. But we'll be doing a lot of messaging around this. So, yeah, if you decide this is where we're going.
Any more questions at the moment? Well, first of all, I appreciate all your work and leadership. And I appreciate the work of the boundary committee I attended to. And just so everybody knows, Dave did a great job of sort of staggering board member involvement so we don't break any public meeting laws. But I think everybody's attended. And this was just a really robust, valuable conversation that we had here tonight. And I'd like to thank everybody for your participation and your meaningful thoughts and questions. Because I think what we struggle with and the community members that listen to these meetings and then talk about it, it helps sort of them all understand. So just really thank you for your leadership around a very difficult conversation. Okay. And thanks for everybody for coming tonight and spending your evening with us. So up next is our inter-district transfers.
Thank you.
Does anybody need a break? Are you guys okay? Good? Okay.
I think that's me. Hang on. Let me get my notes on this. I think in the packet that we had a oh, there it is.
Okay, we're coming back into session. We had a short break, so, okay, Dave.
So in front of you, we've got the interdistrict transfers. It's that time of the year for the board to take action on. Mostly it's determining how many transfers in and how many transfers out we want to allow. We're starting to prepare for our transfer process coming into the next school year. So I wanted to give you a little bit of information about what the transfers look like. And then I want to have a little bit of a discussion about some guidance on where you want me to go with something. On the right-hand part of your paper, you'll see the board-approved limits. We did 20 students out and we did 50 students in, and then we broke it by the grade level of schools. That's what we voted on last year. So that table on the right is kind of what was approved. And then I want you, we've got kind of the transfers out total, transfers in total. That was. And then you've got kind of some other information about the estimated transfers out of the virtual charters and then the transfers related to COA. We had our COA teacher leave at the beginning of the year, it hasn't been a great, we've had folks who have left that program and gone to other programs. It needs work. We're working on that to kind of figure out what is our pathway forward with COA, but some of the students, there's 13 that have transferred out to other schools. There's other kids in that program who came into our brick and mortar schools too. But the basic gist of this is 20 go via the lottery. So after you pull them out of the total, there were basically 121 you pull the the virtual charters out. You pull the 20 that we let out via the lottery. There's about 121 students that are not related to a virtual school who transferred out. Once the lottery's done, you have to do an interdistrict transfer, you have to have a hardship. Hardships are based on, there's a couple reasons why we approve these. Military, if your parent has been deployed in the military, McKinney-Vento status, if there's some homelessness going on, then we will often, by law, allow these transfers in or out. Documented medical conditions, the death of a student's parent, location of this family's. This one is probably the most common, which is the location of their childcare is a reason to be able to get an interdistrict transfer. A student who's involved in a documented case of severe harassment, bullying, or intimidation. The last two there are commonly the most common things that happen. Usually with daycare, that's just not, typically I'm going to do what's best for the kids, for the students and the families. But I had a couple of experiences this year with other districts of kids transferring into ours. And the other districts basically just said no. Not really thinking about kids and students. And we're in that situation, which is enrollment's an issue for us. And I felt like I needed to bring this to you for me to, and it doesn't have to be right now, but my style is mostly, so what happens is if it's not obvious what the hardship is, like childcare, I'll invite the family in to meet with me. We'll talk through what the issues are, and then we'll make a decision about what's kind of best for the kids and the family. But like I said, I had some interactions with some other districts and they aren't following by exactly the same rules. And so I just need to know where you want me to go with this because it's my nature to do what's best for kids and families, but we could be saying no. But it just, I don't know. I felt like this is a conversation I felt like we should have and make a decision around. Not tonight necessarily. Then I'll bring it back with a motion with the actual numbers once we can talk about what you think. We want to do the same thing we did last year. Do we want to change it? and then I'll bring that motion back the next board meeting.
For these transfers, do these include transfers do they go to other public schools? Or do they go to homeschool, or do they?
Homeschools don't really get counted that way.
They're in relation when they decide to go to homeschool.
Okay.
They're just in the total number.
They're in the total. Yeah. So I think what I need from you is just an indication. Do we want to keep the same release and receive numbers? Do we need to change them a little bit? And then I think next time I'd just like some direction on where we want to go with. I mean, we could say no. We're not allowing transfers out of our district, except for in the case of military deployment or, these other pieces. But that's just not, usually I'm bringing the family in, we're talking through the issue, and then we're making a decision based on that meeting.
Does it cost money to allow them to transfer?
No. It just, we don't have that enrollment is all.
Well, we lose the students, the funds for the student to be in our district. So that money follows them to their other district.
And so I've done this since 2010. In every district I've been in I've been the transfer person. The other thing that we do is I typically like to hold that meeting and have a real conversation with the family, because of when you say no, just without any, you basically force people to lie. Is they begin to they get the addresses and I don't like that either, because that doesn't feel good. By the same token, my decisions here also have an impact on our bottom line. And I felt like we needed to at least just have this conversation out loud of where you want me to go with that.
Can I just clarify what we're looking at? I'm sorry, were you? Okay. The board approved limits. This isn't actual transfers. These are just limits that have been set for inflow and outflow. Is that right?
There's a process that happens in the spring where we allow a certain number of students to come in and we allow a certain number of students to go out. And so there's a lottery that happens, and that's usually the 20 that you're seeing there.
Okay. Okay. So that's just what's in policy or practice right now.
It's in practice. You guys take action on it. I won't say it's a policy.
Okay. On the left side, I just want to be really clear about what I'm looking at. So we've had, if I'm reading this right, in the current school year, we have had 20 students transfer in.
Yes.
We've had 177 students transfer out. 23 of those, or an additional 23, have transferred to a virtual charter school. Is that part of the 177 or
Yes,
in addition to?
that's part of
the 177. And that 177 would also include 13 transfers related to COA change.
Yes.
Okay.
And the homeschool, transferring to homeschools, not to another public school, is also included in the 177.
Okay. Okay. Then in the current enrollment numbers down below, the 202 on the top line for total virtual charter schools, is that the COA enrollment?
No, that's the total number of kids in our district that are attending virtual schools over the last several years. Yeah.
Okay. And that's included in our enrollment?
No, it's there's a 3% cap on virtual. Once you go over 3% of your student body having gone to a virtual school, you can begin to deny enrollment. Now, again, for me, I would be calling the family and talking about, because sometimes even though we're over the 3%, it may be the best move for that family. And so I wouldn't necessarily deny that transfer if it's what's best for that student and family.
Sure, sure. But I'm just trying to make sense of the numbers I'm seeing here. So the 3% cap limit is like the numbers on the right of the screen. That's just the limit. That's not an actual
No, may
number of
I hop
students?
in with that?
Yeah.
So
please.
this policy we passed last 2 years ago, year and a half ago. So essentially that is of all the students residing in our boundaries, once 3% of them or more have gone to or at a virtual charter school, we may deny anyone else moving on. So that isn't necessarily about this year at all. That's just there are 3,869 students in our district. 202 currently go to charter schools. Everyone was grandfathered in before we set that 3% cap. And so it's already over 3%, and we won't go below anytime soon, I assume. But yeah, so I was confused about that, but it's the idea that there's 116 students that we would hit that 3%, and we're over that.
So are those 116 students, does the 202 exceed the 116? Is that what we're looking at?
Because if I'm
So it's
reading it
not
correct, the
actually an
3% would
enrollment
be-
number, it's a limit,
No.
is what I'm getting at.
Right.
And it is based on whatever the count is of K through 12
Sure,
students.
so
in the district.
3% of 3869, whatever that is. So what's the negative 86? I'm sorry, I'm belaboring
That's
this.
what we're over the cap.
Your cap's
Is that
116,
202 minus 116?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I am curious. So 177 is clearly over 20.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's a certain amount that go to homeschool, so that wouldn't count towards the transfer release number.
I think we have the homeschool included in the 177.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious how we get to 177 from a cap of 20.
You still, even though we cap it, you still have a hardship
Sure.
that you can apply for. So these are folks who have applied for hardships or they're going to homeschool.
Okay. And then the homeschool wouldn't even count towards that release. They're just allowed to do that.
Yes, but again, a lot of times it gets really challenging as I'm working with families. Like, do you say no?
Can you say no to someone going to homeschool?
Not really. But again, there's a lot of times I'm trying to meet with the families to talk through the issues so we can kind of get at how we could solve and move forward.
So my last question is just on that. You've had these conversations a lot.
Yeah.
Would you have a rough percentage on how often having a solid conversation impacts them to not go?
I would say that so let's talk about like at Forest Grove, we were more successful. I think there's still a lot of challenges with what happened in the district and how families feel about what's going on. That's still a really challenge for us. And so a lot of folks, it's, am I going to, and again, it's why I'm kind of looking direction. We need to have a conversation is because if I start saying no more often, we're going to run more up against this. Well, I'm unhappy now. I'm in your district, but I'm really unhappy about it. And that's the piece where typically I'm trying to work with the family and find some middle ground. But I wouldn't say that I've been, a lot of families are still not happy.
So I will say when we talked about this 3% cap limit for virtual charter schools, public schools, it was a big conversation we had about it doesn't feel right saying, sorry, you're stuck. We have to do this.
Mhm.
But we also had a frank conversation that it becomes a problem for our whole community when we start losing this money that we didn't plan for, we didn't budget for, and then all of a sudden we can't do for our community students who don't have the ability to be mobile and go to other schools. And then now their education is worse because there's some people that have the ability to take their kids out of school, which is great. But I guess I'm interested in are you asking that we raise that release number so that it
No.
gets closer to the 177? I guess I'm confused at how we've got that.
They can always, again, our release number is just the release number. hardships are always, they can always apply for those. I think what I'm looking for from you is I just wanted to make very transparent what my calculus is, that as I'm working with families on these hardships, what I'm doing, and want some guidance around, that you want me to be. I've seen where some other districts are making other decisions. And I just wanted to be transparent about the fact that that's not my style. But if you tell me as a school district, that's what we need to do, then I will make that happen. But I just trying to be transparent about this.
I very much appreciate the transparency, and I very much appreciate your style of caring for children and families as human beings. So on that end, I can see, I have a sort of a knee-jerk response of like, well, why do our limits really exist if we are going to commit to caring for each situation as an individual? At the same time, I want to have policy in place that protects us and gives us parameters, in the event that you are not the person holding those. I trust you to have those conversations. I don't know, what it would look like if it wasn't you having those conversations. So while I don't think that our limits currently feel realistic, I do think that there is value in having some sort of parameter and policy around this.
I'm actually not suggesting you change your limits. I'm really just looking to have this conversation on where you want me to go with some of these conversations, because I think your limits are actually just fine. But again, as we're dealing with this, I just felt like it should be transparent how I'm working with it. And if you need me to be different, I'll do that.
How often do you think it's a situation where it's really like, this is what is best for this student and their family's education, their growth, and how much of it is without sounding callous, what they think is going to give their student the best opportunity because of whatever perceived issue is so poor here?
Yeah, I would say most of the time families usually have a pretty good reason about why they're looking, whether it's bullying or whether there's some harassment going on or some other things. There are situations where there are folks who are just looking for a change, but I would say the vast majority of folks have some. I mean, there's lots of situations that happen, but it's not all.
I was wondering if it's public information from other districts, like, how do we know, is this pretty normative? Or is this like, wow, other districts really are keeping it at 20 and we are close to 200?
We can try and pull some data. I'm not exactly sure where we could get that, because this is very uncontrolled across the state, and they passed some laws on it. I want to say it was probably 2018, 19, but it's been still kind of a mess across the state, how it works. But let me see if we can pull some data.
The other comment I was going to say about it is if we had a leveling solution for class sizes, then it wouldn't matter, right? Because every year you could choose the staffing needed,
Yeah.
number of kids in the district.
I mean, again, in our secondary schools, we can even out our class sizes. Again, it's much easier to regulate our class sizes at the secondary level, where we have lots of kids per grade level or even course level. So certainly this is mostly the elementary structure problem is still partly there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One point of clarification, I think the board needs to understand, anybody listening out there. We did not have 177 net new transfers out this year. They are grandfathered. Once like we do it 5 years ago and they're still in the Sherwood district, they still can stay in the Sherwood district, right? Or is it every year that they get looked at?
No, I would say that this is the number of transfers out of our district, including virtual, including homeschool, including other things right now.
No, I get that, but
Okay.
is that all net new as of 2025, or is that because they transferred out 3 years ago and are still in that virtual school? And does it keep rolling forward?
It's new.
So we're having
Yeah.
177 new students this
Mhm.
year go out of district.
Yes.
Do we know if any of those are re-requests from doing it from year priors? Do they
No.
have to re-ask every year?
No, they don't have to re-ask every year.
Okay.
That's
So that, yeah,
again,
that's just getting to my point. Okay.
right.
So looking at that, if 3% of our enrollment is 116, 177 minus the 20 that we've said is our limit. So let's just use 157 as our limit. That's about 5%.
So,
So if I look at that,
the virtuals is different. It's not by the year. That's the total that we have out of our district right now over the last whatever number of years. The top graph is specifically this year.
I'm trying to connect it back to that declining enrollment chart that we were looking at,
Yeah.
where Newberg has the largest graph down. I mean, this might help explain why we have such a tremendous.
So we presented on the 18% part because of Leslie went out and did the enrollment, went back and did, and we also presented it to the boundary committee too, represented that data. But the 18% was 300 plus students who, and actually the 18% was over 2019 to 2025, which is an even larger number. So, yeah. It's yes, it's connected, but I don't think when we start to connect the those studies are looking at different time periods. I don't know, that doesn't
Well,
feel like that helped you.
At any rate, just sheer mathematics, that number in the transfer out, if you subtract out our board approved limit, represents about 4% of our total students right now. For what it's worth.
Mhm.
That feels significant.
So again, I think there's an opportunity to provide me some guidance around where you want me to go with this.
So so hardships, there's certain ones that you can't deny, correct?
Yeah.
Can you give us any insight to what percent of these are more decision based and which are more just that this is happening because, you know, your
Why don't I
parents is-
try and pull some, I mean, we have the.
I'm
I'll
interested
try
to know
and
what
pull some
your,
data around what this looks like.
I'm mostly interested to know what your, like how many of these families you have to talk to. Like that's obviously a burden to deal with that and to say no to
Yeah.
that many parents who care deeply about the way that their child's education is going is
Yeah.
not easy. It's a difficult decision to say that we're gonna not let anyone leave because it causes maybe more problems down the road. It's a tough ask, and I
Yeah.
get why you're
Right. Why don't I try and pull some more data together for this so we can look at these numbers with a little more specificity so you can kind of see. And then I'll bring it back at the next meeting. This doesn't have to happen the next time. So we can bring back some more data and have some more discussion.
So I just kind of want to piggyback on Andy's comment about innovation. Because as I look at the transfer related to COA, which I know what was the sort of the issue there. So there's 13 kids, and then out to other virtual charter schools, you know, those aren't going away. They really were popular because of COVID, but they've met the needs of certain kids and families. So I think if we have an opportunity to look at innovation and becoming a really amazing charter school program, that could be a draw. Again, I don't really know all the conditions about charter schools and what they offer and what they don't. I think I think there's some complications there. But I'd also like to thank you for the time that you give to the families, because I think that's really meaningful to have somebody in a position that you have to really reach out and say, tell me what's going on with your family and what's going on here, but also how do we make it work best for the kids? Because at the end of the day, you know, we look at all these numbers and we look at the widgets and the numbers based on budget. And then we have such compelling stories from teachers that come and talk to us about kids. And that's a really difficult balance for you to make. But so I appreciate the time that you give to those families who may not think that they have a voice or somebody that's willing to listen. I know there was a person commented on Newberg community discussions about, hey, does anybody have any ideas about private schools or schools in Sherwood? And I'm like, so I Facebook messaged her and said, hey, have you considered reaching out to the superintendent? I realized that you're looking at schools outside of the Newberg School District, and maybe there's information that you might gain. And of course, they didn't respond, but when people post those, that's just like an odd thing to me to post that in a community chat group. So that tells me they don't really have people that they have the opportunity to talk to, and so I think that that's really helpful for families. So thank you. This is a complicated issue, but okay, so we'll move on, maybe get some more information, and like you said, we have some time to think about it.
Great.
So this might be one of the longer meetings. So let's pop over to our draft board calendar. Dave. I know that.
That board calendar, okay, we can move it along here. In front of you is a draft of the prospective board meetings for next year. I think there's only a couple of places where we need to probably have a little quick discussion, and that's September. There'd be 2 meetings in July. You could decide to only do one there. That's still a good, but definitely I think this year we only did 1 meeting in August, and I would recommend 2. I think we had quite a bit of work to handle there. We've got in September the 8th, depending upon where you decide to start school, that would either be the first day of school or the second week of school, depending upon kind of where you go with the academics. But I think we could, I kind of like the 8th and the 15th, the blues there, but we put on there 2 green ones that could also work. It works going into October just fine. Kind of depends on where we want to go with that. October looks fine to me. November looks fine. December looks fine. January, February, March. Typically, we've only done 1 meeting in March before. I think this year's calendar, it makes sense to do 2. That's actually right in the middle of budget season, so the extra meeting in that period of time, I think will be fine. It fits in well with April and the rest of the flow. So I think really my recommendation to you and what I'll bring back the next time would be, if you give me the nod, I think March we do 2. The real question, I think, is do we want to do 1 or 2 meetings in July? And do we want to start on the 8th, or do you want to start on the 15th in September? And if you give me a little direction, then we'll fix it and bring it back next time ready to go.
I think the September date will depend wholly on our school date, on our academic calendar. So I think if we were to choose that, or if we went the after Labor Day start, I think I'd be more comfortable with the 15/29. But if we do a earlier one, then I would support 8/22.
Yeah, I would suggest green September no matter what.
Okay,
People are gonna have extended weekend, maybe even if it's the first week of school or not. It's just
gotcha.
a lot of chaos, that first couple weeks.
So sorry, Jeremy, would your preference be to have the 15th even if we started school
Yep.
September 1?
Or the 31st. I
Right.
think it's August 31st.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say green for September is my suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
And
comfortable.
I'm either near or there for July, so.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Jeremy on that, just because we've got the luxury of that 5th Tuesday in September. That opens up the first 2 weeks of the year for us to be in schools as well. That's a busy time.
And then July, 1 or 2 days, I can make that happen. That seems a general.
I think 1 in July.
So 11th maybe? And then usually the end of the month is when everybody's in the organizations kind of taking vacation.
You mean the 14th or the 20th?
Oh, sorry. I was looking at August. 14th.
Yeah,
And then so we'll do the 14th and not the 28th.
it sounds good.
Okay. I will make those adjustments. 2 in March.
Okay, Tammy, you want to come on up and talk to us about academic calendars?
Yes, as if you didn't have enough to read, I created 6 of them. So we're going to talk really briefly about these options, and I'll kind of explain to you the steps that we've taken so far to solicit some input from folks on these calendars. So this coming year is a difficult one because Labor Day is very, very late. And so I've developed 3 calendars for elementary and 3 calendars for secondary. There's just minor differences again, similar to what we did for this year, which is switch up some conference and grading times based upon the level for better feedback on academic progress for parents, specifically at the elementary school. So I tried to create a summary table for folks to review. Upon reflection, I made an error on the summary table, and I wanted to make sure Director Byerly didn't catch it before I explained it to you. So for option 3,
I feel seen. I feel seen.
You are. Option 3, I indicated as part of the cons that it was a shorter summer break. It really isn't. So a typical summer break for kids is 11 weeks. By having Labor Day so late and starting on September 8th, that would add an additional week. So it really has the impact on option 1 and not option 3. So I just wanted to clarify that. I will say up front, there is no right answer to this difficult decision, and I will not make lots of people happy, regardless of what the decision is. Some people like the start after Labor Day. It's a very traditional start. There are districts that start before Labor Day, some local, Sherwood, Westland, Wilsonville, Beaverton. But there are also some districts that maintain their start after Labor Day. That seems to be sacred with a lot of the community and families, that they like that start after Labor Day. But what that does is it pushes us into the 3rd week of June in 2027, which is really, really late. So just so everybody who's listening understands, option 1 is our traditional start. It means that we would start on September 8th. We would end school on June 18th. Option 2 is before Labor Day, but it's actually kind of a hybrid. It's a midweek start. What that would do is allow us to start our new teacher in service on a Monday, Tuesday, and then in service for everybody would start on Wednesday. And then we would come back and start students on September 2nd. That would put us at a June 15th end date. And then option 3 is starting on August 31st and ending on June 11th. And of course, that is the option that starts us a week before Labor Day. So what I did last week is I pushed out the calendar options to our staff for some input. We did a thought exchange. And I would like to tell you that there was a decisive response, but there was not. There tends to be a favored option, which is option 3, but it is not a landslide by any means, because a lot of people did chime in about the need to consider what families like to do, whether they want that extended Labor Day weekend. And so just so you folks know, I'm just presenting for the first time to you tonight. After tonight, I'm going to send out a thought exchange to our community as well. and we're going to see what they have to say, and then I can bring that information back to you at the next meeting. So, are there questions about the calendars?
On the thought exchange, I like that idea for at least the school community. Because I don't think the rest of the community cares. Are you going to make sure that the question is like, okay, if we do start before Labor Day, that also means it's only 2 weeks into June on the summer, start of summer break versus the third week of June. I mean, I just want to make sure it's very clear to the parents out there, right? So
Yes, so my plan is, after I fix my error, my plan is to do exactly what I did with our staff, which is I provided them with the 3 options at each level, and I provided them with the summary table so they understood specifically when school would start, when school would end, so that they can kind of look and compare.
One other factor that may be moot next year, but I think is worth considering is right now, one of the factors for me, knowing that I have high schoolers that are taking AP classes, is those dates are fixed, right? We know when those dates will be. So starting earlier would give us more instructional time before those AP tests.
Correct.
I say that knowing that it's not really an issue this year because most, if not all of our AP classes are only 2 trimesters.
Correct.
So that wouldn't matter.
Well, actually, not all, it's about a 50-50 split between two trimester and 3 trimester AP classes. It's not as much of an issue this year because we started on September 2nd. So you're correct. We will lose essentially a week of instruction leading up to AP testing. I think one of the advantages of option 3 that was really appealing to a lot of our staff members is that the trimester for secondary schools, grades 6 through 12, we ended at Thanksgiving week, which seemed like a really natural break. And then we come back and we have 3 weeks with students before winter break. So it felt like they could get farther into trimester 2, that it was more meaningful instead of having a break a week after we come back from Thanksgiving and then having 2 weeks and then the winter break. So it allowed us an opportunity to end trimester 1 right at Thanksgiving break. And on that note, you might be wondering why we don't shorten Thanksgiving break and why that wasn't an option with the calendars. And I will tell you resoundingly, the opinion of most people over the course of the last several years when we've had a week-long Thanksgiving break is that they want to keep that. I will tell you that attendance rates, on the years that we didn't start Thanksgiving break until Wednesday, the attendance rates on Monday, Tuesday were very poor. I think a lot of people travel, rightfully so. And so I think both for staff and for families, having that whole week at Thanksgiving is precious time.
How do you think that the idea of starting before Labor Day and having just that like almost introductory period seems helpful for students rather than I'm thinking, all right, my family's taking a long Labor Day break, and now I'm actually not going to make the first day of school because we're staying extra time. Yeah, it would seem to me that starting before would be a nice thing to try in this odd calendar.
Cole, what do you think?
Yeah.
I know as an AP student myself, that an extra week means a lot. It might not seem like a lot of time, but that's an extra 5 class periods where you are sitting with your teacher. And oftentimes, I know when I took AP US history, that week essentially was spent studying specifically for the test rather than trying to cram in more coursework to then apply onto the test. So I think that starting a full week before Labor Day would be great. I also know that the trimester break at Thanksgiving is nice. It's weird to have the weeks offset with that and have the finals on a weird spot and then a weird amount of weeks of trimester 2. So I do like option 3 in regards to more rigorous classes and in the trimester break around the Thanksgiving break.
I'm wondering about athletics. Is there any when district level OSAA games start? Is that typically the first week of school? Is it before?
It's actually the week before.
Okay, so I guess kids would be in school and more in the
It-
routine of school when those games start, and there could
Correct.
be
In
pros.
this instance, with this particular calendar, if for option 3, students would be in school the week that
That games.
athletic competitions start. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? More to come. I'll let you know how those results of the community feedback are at our next meeting.
Thank you very much on that. Okay. So you want to talk about intervention and discipline
I do.
plan review?
Yes, I am really excited to talk about this piece. I think this is really exciting work. And what I will preface this with, thank you, is that this is going to be kind of a 30,000-foot view. We're not going to get into a lot of details, but I do want to share with you kind of what our vision looks like moving forward with doing some alignment with our behavior support and discipline plan. So the big key in this is alignment. Am I going up or down? There we go. So just so you know, there is a collective interest in doing this work together between the district, Newberg Education Association, and OSEA. So we've been having ongoing discussions for years about behavior management. And I know that there are concerns that are brought up from time to time from staff about how we handle, ongoing behaviors and what that looks like. So we all have a collective interest in this. I'm really excited that we're all going to work together to try to wrap our heads around a system that will work for our district. So in the NEA contract, Article 30 specifically talks about behavior. And the specific statement that I kind of highlighted talks about the building administrators and association reps will work together to update and amend building discipline plans before May 1st for the upcoming school year. So our work is actually going to begin this Thursday. It's an ongoing conversation that we've had with NEA to really bring clarity to our staff members about, what behaviors look like, whether they are handled in the classroom or whether they're handled at the office or administrative level, and what the follow-up looks like for those behaviors. So the overall goal in working on this alignment is to develop a framework for elementary and secondary behavior support and discipline systems. I think the big key here is consistency. Ensure consistency with expectations and approaches in all K-5 buildings, 6-8 buildings, and 9-12 buildings. So we are trying to work as kind of leveled groups to develop these plans. And then communicate with and train all staff on the framework and collaboratively develop a building behavior support and discipline plan at each building. So this is the timeline. So our initial conversation, as I said, is happening with NEA through labor management on Thursday. I've had the privilege of working with Dr. Christie and Mike Weston, who is our NEA union president, to kind of develop what this looks like, how we're going to roll it out. So it's been a collaborative process even from developing this meeting that's coming up. So we'll establish elementary and secondary work groups through labor management, and we're going to start aligning practices at buildings February through May of this year. Our big task ahead of us is identifying in this labor management group, both Thursday and in the spring, what constitutes a minor behavioral infraction and what constitutes a major behavioral infraction. Because what I will tell you is that our buildings in the district are already doing this work, but it looks a little different at each building. And so we're really trying to hone in so that we have consistent, equitable approaches to behaviors. And then ongoing building work is going to happen in 26 and 27, where we collaborate with the staff to develop specific building-wide expectations for behavior. So it sounds maybe a little bit like we're putting the cart before the horse when we talk about minors and majors, and then we talk about going into 26, 27 and developing this holistic plan. I hope it'll make more sense here in the next couple of slides, but I just wanted to call that out. So the Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook, I think a lot of people feel like, oh, well, this is the discipline plan. This is what we use to deal with behaviors. And it is part of the plan, and it is a what we reference when we're dealing with disciplinary issues, but it's going to support the work that we do in building these developing these building discipline plans moving forward. So we're going to use this, as we always do, as a guide for how we manage students who have behavioral infractions. And it's not going to be the discipline plan, because student rights and responsibilities talk about what students are supposed to do and then what happens when they don't do what they're supposed to do. And there's usually a range of consequences. The research supports the need for positive, preventative, and restorative approaches to behavior. So that's what we're going to talk about next. Those are things like social emotional learning, restorative practices, and then positive behavior and intervention supports, or PBIS, as it's most well known. So this is the work ahead. And I think this is the important work, which is we've got to define our belief system. We have to determine how we teach students what we expect from the get-go. We need to talk about how we reinforce that behavior. And then we need to decide how we intervene when the negative behavior occurs, both in the classroom and at the office level. So some examples, when we talk about teaching what we expect, some examples, schools will use acronyms like PAUSE, practicing respect, accepting responsibility, working together, and safety manners. So it's a way to teach kids through an acronym how they're supposed to behave. Or CARE, cooperation, attitude, responsibility, empathy. So those are all examples of defining what we want to see in students and then reinforcing that in the classroom. So the belief system, what do we believe about students, and how does this guide how we address behavior? Like I said before, we're doing some really good work already in the district. I use Dundee as my example. So at Dundee Elementary, they've defined 3 beliefs. Behavior is a form of communication. All students can succeed, and kids do well when they can. And these are kind of the grounding beliefs that help us develop the behavior and intervention system moving forward. So a lot of you probably recognize this. This is the tiered pyramid, MTSS, academic interventions and behavior interventions both focus on this tiered system of support. So at tier 1, we're providing intervention for all students. This is the classroom level interventions, and it's not just academic, it's also helping teach kids what behaviors we expect, routines, practices, things like that. Tier 2 is more targeted, so students who maybe aren't understanding or not getting or learning as quickly as others, we would provide some more targeted support. And then at tier 3, these are more intensive supports. So I'll very quickly go through these and talk about them. So universal supports for all, that's the 100%, everybody gets it, which is creating positive climates in the classroom, establishing routines, communicating classroom expectations and behaviors that we really want to see out of students, reteaching the behaviors and expectations, and then recognizing and rewarding positive behaviors when we see it. Tier 2 is typically about 10 to 20% of the students. And these are more targeted interventions for students who still have, again, a difficult time learning those behaviors and understanding what's expected of them. So this would be small, these are just examples, small group, social skills, check-in, check-out procedures, which is usually like identifying the behaviors and then checking in and out with a student each day. How do you feel like you did? Behavior goal sheets, mentoring and progress monitoring. And then tier 3 is our most intensive supports for students. And this is a very, very small percentage of students that we provide targeted these intensive supports for. So these are things like developing behavior support plans. What do we want to see? Who's involved? How do we intervene? Functional behavioral assessments, maybe, counseling and other wraparound services for students and families, and then progress monitoring and potential referral for services. I think the key in all of this is the progress monitoring piece. We can't make decisions about what to do with students unless we have data, right? And we have to collect data as much on the behavioral piece as we do on the academic piece to be able to intervene with students. So, like I said, the work ahead of us in the near future is trying to determine what staff managed versus office managed behaviors are, identifying the minor and majors, establishing the responses for behaviors. So staff managed, those look like more tiered responses, and then office managed, those are the major. And so I think the important thing to understand is that we want to clearly identify how we document, how we respond, and more importantly, how we communicate and bring that back, that communication loop to teachers so they understand what's going on. So at the end of all of this, our outcomes, our hopeful outcomes are that we develop systems of support, systems that support student learning, positive behaviors and skills. That's what we want. We want as much to teach them about the behaviors and skills to be successful in life as we do the academics. Processes that are proactive instead of reactive. Decisions for interventions that are based upon data, like I just said, and then supports and interventions that are consistent, predictable, and equitable for students, families, and staff. I know that was quick.
Appreciate it. Two questions. One's hopefully very easy to answer. So this is intervention discipline plan review. Where in either tier 1, 2, or 3, I'm assuming it's tier 3, does it fall into, like, you know, in school detention, suspension? Where does that fall into that? Because I didn't quite see those type of actions or potential, I don't know, disciplines.
Yeah.
In that. So
Yeah. So when we talk about tier 1, 2, and 3, those are the interventions. Those are the ways that we're coming along side and trying to support the students and making changes in their behavior. What you're talking about is more going back to how do we handle those major behavioral issues, and that's when we refer back to board policies and our student rights and responsibilities handbook. And if you look at our handbook, you'll see that for we have matrices for elementary and then secondary with a range of consequences based upon what the infraction is. So, for example, you know, maybe cheating has a minimum response of detention and a maximum response of an out-of-school suspension. You'll see that in our student rights and responsibilities handbook. Does that make sense?
it does. I guess then really what you shared, like the tiers, was more intervention focused and not necessarily discipline plan. And I guess that's where I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
I'm losing sight of that. So.
That's okay. It really is kind of it's a multi-pronged
Okay.
System where we have to develop these interventions, but then we also have to adhere to our discipline policies and our student rights and responsibilities handbook and ensure that along with the behavior infractions, if they result in a major, then we've got to follow through and impose some level of consequences.
I think the most important aspect of this is, again, the collaboration that we're having with NEA around, because there are incidents that happen and we're trying to clarify. They're wanting help from the administration is wanting help. So kind of working together to define what does the staff member work with, and then what does the office work with. And so the reason we're bringing this is because of this has been in the contract for a while and it hasn't been worked on. And it's just, all the schools are doing this work already, but they're all doing it a little bit differently. And probably in the secondary, we're a little more aligned than in the elementary. And so we're bringing this to you because we're going to start on this work that's going to be probably 6 to 8 months worth of work as we align, and wanted to make sure you knew that that was happening. But we're happy to kind of work. I mean, the NEA has been a great partner, OSEA, and we'll kind of work together to see if we can align some of these practices. Some of it will be discipline, other parts of it will be intervention. But we're trying to get all of that kind of laid out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I love to hear that That was one of the things when I was running for the board is the inconsistency between the schools. It drove me nuts. And not one school looked like the other. I get there's a small community aspect of it, but like when it comes to discipline, that's pretty black and white. It should be, except for the situation at hand, that may be a little gray, but like the disciplines and everything, I mean, that should be handled pretty much universal. I guess I don't know if this is going to require any board changes or policy changes based on your research, but even if it doesn't, I'd love to hear the outcome of this 6 to 8 months down the road.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
what the big learning points were,
Yep.
or the big aha moments, or things to think of just as we move forward with life as a school district. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I can bring back and give you an updated report on what our alignment looks like. And yeah.
I think you beat me on the button. Go ahead.
I knew it was a race. Yeah. Thank you, Tammy. A couple of things that I want to draw attention to in particular. I really appreciate the focus on leading with values and beliefs. I think that's a really important part of this process because I think all of us have had that experience as parents where your like behaviors can sometimes obscure your view of this human that you know and love, right? And so to lead with that and name that, I think is really important. I also appreciated what you talked about in terms of progress monitoring and the connections between our academic MTSS and our behavioral MTSS. And I would love to see some of those data. If we have some information about number of minor incidents and major incidents and kind of what the nature of those are, I think that would be really helpful for us. And then to kind of, as Jeremy was saying, kind of as the work goes on, I'm eager to see what happens.
Yeah. And I will say that that's a very good point. In terms of the data, I think even that is something where we need to more closely align because people are tracking things differently. We have this amazing tool in Panorama, and we have some people who are using that to track and progress monitor on behaviors, and we need to all come along and do the same thing.
I was just going to say, I really appreciate the complexity of balancing response to behavior with the discipline. And really my heart was warmed to hear about the intervention side. I think this idea that the behavior is communication, and there is a reason that kids do poorly. They would love to do well. If they could do well, they would. And so how can we equip them to do well? That's what I hear when you're talking about the tiers of support, like preventative intervention. If you have the cheating example, that I'm like, you could, put the kid in lunch detention, and then will that make it less likely for it to happen again? Or what's the problem that were they having trouble learning that content?
Right.
And then maybe we can support them differently.
Right.
So it gets complicated with behavior, and I appreciated how you presented on both sides of it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. It's complicated. And I think it's complex for staff, for parents, and even for administrators who are having to navigate because there is, you may be consequencing a student according to the student handbook, but you might also be doing a restorative practice with that particular student because that's the learning that happens that hopefully prevents that student from doing it again.
I just had a question. The tiered system with responding to behavior, am I correct in the understanding that they begin at the tiered 1 and then before they can go to tier 3 necessarily, they have to go through tier 2 and then to tier 3?
Yeah, so tier 1, again, is basically, as best I can describe it, general expectations that are laid out in the classroom with rules, how students behave. They get taught that. Every student gets that. That's a universal intervention. And then for the kids who maybe are misbehaving, they would move up to tier, 2 with some progress monitoring, and there would be some interventions that take place with those students to try to get them to move to the tier 1, which is they can behave, they can follow instructions, they can, work within the classroom routines. And then if there's continued problems, then the student moves up to tier 3. And that's why you see maybe 10 to 20% at tier 2, even less than that, 3 to 5% at tier 3.
Okay.
So
Because I've had discussions with an individual who I don't necessarily want to throw under the bus, but who works directly with this tier system. I know that they've expressed a feeling of wanting to be able to advance an individual in special cases that they can recognize that like a tier 2 system wouldn't work, where they see that the case is so severe that they feel a need to advance directly to tier 3, as to not spend more of this kid's time in tier 2 in a system that wouldn't necessarily work for their special case. So I'm just wondering what the direct application is, to if there's a way for them to, say, hey, like I believe this is a special case, and get, an administrator or someone else's approval to.
Yeah, so I think what my response to that would be, we look at multiple angles, multiple data points in any given situation to determine how to intervene with students and when to maybe escalate up to a tier 3. But skipping from tier 1, which is 100% everybody gets the same instruction, to a tier 3 without having data or interventions that are tried first seems to be a big jump, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious. Thank you.
Cool, you're gonna go places. That's all I gotta say with those questions.
Okay.
He did make me trigger a thought and a memory, and taking back to tier 1. I remember at least in middle school, high school, even my days, and back even with my kids are there. I think half of them went through the handbook the first couple of days in the classes and kind of agreed to it. And then my daughter, I don't remember her saying that she did that. What does that tier 1 look like when it's talking about general rules? And it's just on the classroom, but maybe even school or school district wide understanding of what these behaviors should be.
Yep. So that's all part of the alignment that we're going to do, Jeremy. It's a good point. We have to have consistency. We have to have everybody teaching the same expectations, not just half of the students learning about, what to do and what not to do, but we have to do that with everybody. So I think that's going to be part of the conversation, and the learning and the growing is ensuring that we're all on the same page and that we're all teaching the same thing.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for this important work, and great job. Okay, I think we're gonna talk about the Rennie Field. And thank you to Clay Downing from CPRD for being here. A fellow Indiana University grad. Thank you very much.
Great. All right. So what's in your packet is the agreement that we brought to you in November. So you guys, believe it or not, have seen this before, but what's changed in the packet is it's been signed. But wait, there's more. There's also the Appendix A that includes the delineation of the area we're talking about that was to be improved. So that's now included. And that's pretty much the changes. So what we want is, if you have any questions on this, and then this is an action item as well coming up next.
I appreciate the map and the dedicated area we're touching. I know lately we've been talking specifically just the track and the field inside the track. I remember originally we had these discussions we're talking about, and I still see on here, are there still pickleball courts going in? Is that still the plan?
So
Sure, yeah, that'd be great. Just make sure you hit the button.
Sure. So my name is Clay Downing. I'm the superintendent for CPRD. Thank you for having me. So those amenities are still in the plans for those. We understand that this is a lease agreement, and it is different than what may come after it. We would expect to continue working with the school district and to have some kind of operational agreement in place on how the space gets managed, in part because the construction project associated with Rennie Field doesn't talk about what happens with all the ball fields that are on the site, as well as those other amenities like pickleball and things like that on there. So we understand there's probably, I can't see a situation where we don't have additional conversations to figure out how the site gets managed properly, because we do want to make sure that the school gets to use it in the ways that are going to activate the site and be good for the students and really let it be used the way it's intended. And then we're really hopeful that we get to see it used for the community as well, that it gets to be a benefit in this great park with all these fitness amenities that people can enjoy. So,
Thank you.
or whatever amenities they want to put them to use.
Sure. Thank you.
I recall in the IGA that we have that's kind of running concurrently with this lease agreement that I believe it said we were going to do quarterly reports or meetings with CPRD. So once we get started in the process and the construction begins, I'm very much looking forward to that. And I also wanted to note that I was pleased to see the update to the utilities in the lease agreement that covered more utilities. Thank you.
I have a couple questions about what the track implements will be used for, because I know that as a track athlete, having access to, personal shot puts or javelins or the equipment to do pole vault, that's not something that is very common to have. Is the plan for these implements to be used for the middle school teams?
To the extent that we can, we want to have a full array of equipment for track and field teams at the middle school level. Exactly what sports those include, I don't know. I thought it was interesting in myself to see in the site layout plan javelin, because that's not one of the sports I would typically expect to have handed over to middle school students. But I think the intent is to have a throwing range associated with that, like you would on a typical track team. And I know some track teams at the middle school level, even they may have discus, they may have shot, but you're going to have protection equipment that's going to be there. What I would point out is that what you're seeing in front of you is the furthest extent of the design that we have so far, which is only a site layout plan that does not go into a great level of detail. I would consider this maybe 10% design. So there is a lot left to be scoped out. When you get into land use and planning and go to the city at that time, you're at about 30% design. When you get into your construction drawings, you're at 70% design. And that's where you've really fleshed out a lot more details, because those are the things that are going to be on the ground. But I don't know exactly what equipment's going to be on the field at this point. But I think that once we have those sites defined and get into that design phase, we'll be looking at that protection equipment a lot more with those individual sports.
Awesome. Thank you. I know as a track athlete, seeing all these things go in another spot that isn't at the high school that will be public is exciting. Because I know it also opens up the possibility for Newberg holding middle school event track meets. Because I know that in the middle school program, they're traveling to Tualatin or Tigard every weekend to go to these meets, and they're hanging out there all day. And it's not always pleasant. So to have not necessarily the guarantee, but the possibility of holding our own track meets would be cool.
We would love to have people come to these. I mean, the intent is to have Rennie Field be activated and to have it really be used.
Yeah. Thank you.
So Nate, I think the next thing is we need to vote on. Okay, so we need a motion, please.
I move that the Newberg Dundee Public Schools Board of Directors approve the lease agreement between the Newberg Dundee School District and the Chehalem Park and Recreation District for the property in Exhibit A, and authorize the board chair and the superintendent to execute the agreement on behalf of the district as presented.
Second.
Any further questions? I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Can somebody tell me if,
See a hand.
okay, motion carries unanimously. Great job, you guys. It's been a little bit of work. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, Mark Brown, I think you are going to, you wait. I know you get up early. I know you get up early, so you're the last one to roll up here.
I'm just hoping you will approve what was shared back in December with our course fees and our new course proposals. So I presented all those, no changes from what was presented. So you have them in the packet. If you have questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, I believe there's some motions written there.
I move that the Newberg Dundee Public Schools Board of Directors approve the 2026-2027 NHS school fees as presented.
Second.
Any further questions? We'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
We have an aye from James. Yep, okay, motion carries unanimously. Go home and go to bed. See you.
That was just
Oh,
fees.
oh,
So that-
sorry. Okay, course fees,
Course.
course for NHS, yeah.
I move
Any
that the
que-
Newberg Dundee Public Schools Board of Directors approve the new courses for NHS as presented.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
carried unanimously. Now, you can go. Cole, do you want to start us off on comments?
I'd love to. This was a fun meeting. I'm glad I got to participate. Just some updates on kind of where the music program is at. This last Sunday, a quintet of students in the orchestra program, myself included, was able to go to a festival in Newport that combines performances of student musicians with professional musicians. So my quintet was able to perform, and then we were followed by a trio of cellos from the Newport Symphony. That was a wonderful experience that we got to have. I know that we're performing next meeting for you guys, so I'm looking forward to that as well. A little nervous, but excited for it. I know, yeah. Yeah, that's all I have.
I've got just two quick things to say tonight, but I want to preface by saying that I really appreciate the work that has gone into the boundary conversations, and I can't get out of my mind the idea that this is rebuilding trust within our community. I really want to underscore that. That's really great. Just a couple of things. Joined a couple of my board members at the Edwards Playground for the dedication of both the playground, really, but also a communication board. That was really in honor of Lydia Schramm, who's a former Newberg Dundee employee. It was a beautiful time to gather in her memory, but also to learn about augmented communication devices and how students are using them. And in particular, I want to shout out Sarah Moore and Megan Rogers-Zarnecki for their work and leadership in making that a reality. I thought that was a really cool session. And then I'm excited tomorrow to be at the high school to honor the Russo family with the renaming of the wrestling room. So I hope to see some of you all there. And then lastly, the Martin Luther King Jr. Day event at the Cultural Center this coming Monday will be another opportunity to engage as a community. And I hope to see several folks from our community there and engaging.
I have a few comments about Mountain View. 185 students made honor roll in the first trimester. 84 students of the month since the beginning of the school year. They had 18 parent volunteers for their first school dance with 173 students. So, and the parent group applied for and received an Austin Family Foundation grant that will support PE and cooking classes. So a lot of exciting things going on at Mountain View.
I was honored to be one of those parents at that middle school dance, checking in all those kiddos and instructing them to put their cell phones away. And it was just a really positive, wonderful thing. They're doing great stuff over there. Andy, you stole literally everything I was going to say. Thanking the Boundary Committee, hoping to see everybody at the MLK event at the Cultural Center on Monday. And then just also, I had a wonderful time at the Communication Board dedication at Edwards. It's just been a project for so many years, and really I really enjoyed rehashing just the journey of the playground at Edwards Elementary over the last 5 years, because that place has really grown and been through a lot. So just huge congratulations to Sarah Moore and everybody who was involved in that process. And I have spoken to a lot of kids at Edwards who are really enjoying the communication board, and it's been a really positive addition to their school day. So, and Happy New Year to everybody.
And in addition to those comments, which I was also, just want to say shout out to Newberg Cheer. They took first at their first competition at, I think it was the Laker Rumble. And that's very exciting. So new year and lots of exciting things happening this spring and competitions and, fun things for us to all attend. So that's great.
Yeah, again, another thanks to the boundary committee and for all the time for you, Dave and Nate, or Nate, to be there all those nights and preparing and all that, and all the supportive staff for that. I don't know, it seems so long time ago since our last board meeting. It was last year. The only thing I could think that's going to be connecting community to here is I know that the school, the facilities plant, they offer some space for the toy and joy drive of Newberg, and our family is basically in concert with them, and so I think we support 270 families and around 680 children this year. The actual family count was down a little bit. We feel that some of the, you know, um, you know, things happening in the political public eye is scared some families, but the children count were actually up. So I don't know exactly how that worked, but we still, almost 700 children. So that's huge. And so I just wanted to extend the thank you from the Toy and Joy Drive and Brian Love and the TVFR to the Newberg School District for allowing us to use the space that they offer. So that's it.
I will also pass along the thank you to the boundary committee and everyone involved. For anyone out there who might be watching, clearly this is going to be a big thing. And so I just would encourage everyone who was on that committee, all the parents who feel very strongly one way or the other, to just have your voice heard. You got to come out and you got to talk to somebody to let us know so that we can do things in a way that is transparent, that is based in the community. And just know that we're trying to do what's best for our students in our town, the future of our town, and that the hard asks that we're going to be going out for aren't for nothing. They're for by the future. I think it's really important, and I'm just really hope that we're able to continue to grow from the boundary committee and just get more involvement from our community, because that was already a huge step. And I think that this could be a really big moment for making sure that we're investing the right way into our students.
And I'll keep it fairly short, but I'd be remiss if I didn't take a little time before and talk about, in the weeks leading up to the Christmas break, our community showed up for our families, and Deb talked about it and Jeremy talked about it, but some of the numbers are more than 520 families received support. Over 1,050 students were impacted. 700 plus food boxes and meal kits were delivered. 3,700 food and hygiene items were reached students and families. 200 plus families received holiday gifts. Over $5,000 was provided in direct financial support to for financial and utility assistance, and over 1,200 school resource items were donated to support students. And again, I just have to call out the level of care that comes from this community to our students and our families. And again, we've all talked about it, but even on top of the tough conversations we had tonight, this is the spirit of Newberg. And so I just want to call that out and say thanks. We appreciate it. And with that, I'll turn it off for tonight.
And one last comment about that, Shyla Jasper absolutely needs a shout out. She is a dynamo, and she knows how to reach people and families kids that are just, really needing extra support. And when I went to her classroom to drop, our Rotary Club helped, and it was chaos. And she was just so happy. And I'm like, I could not live in chaos the way she, does with some of the things. And she is just such a blessing and gift to our school district and our families. So on that, we're adjourned. Good night, everyone.